Today, we're going to continue a series called Dare to Dream. Dare to Dream. And we started a couple weeks ago, and we started talking a little bit about the big picture part. We have to get the why right first. In other words, it doesn't matter where you're going if you don't know why you're going there. Okay, so it's not you can answer the what and the how, but if you don't get the why right, and we said, hey, if Jesus isn't your why, you might have some things mixed up. So if you missed that, newbranch.net's our website, and all the messages are there. If you want CDs, if you live in Zuni and don't have technology, I'm just playing. You can pick up CDs in the lobby. We'll do a puppet show or something. I'm just playing. I'm done. I'm done with that. The joke's dead. All right. So, but we do have CDs if you want those. Okay. But please do that, because what we're going to talk about today is very practical. But if you don't have the why right, it really don't matter much where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, it really don't matter much how you get there. Does that make sense? But today, we're going to talk about something I'm very excited about. It's very practical. It's going to seem very simple. But here's the thing. If you don't do it, you're going to find out that it's very hard. So let me ask you a question today. What do you want to accomplish this year? I know a lot of people are anti-New Year's resolutions, I guess. I mean, I've seen a lot on Facebook. I don't have a problem with New Year's resolutions as long as they're linked to the big picture, as long as they're going, hey, this is the bite-sized piece I want to take off of this year. So for some people, I've heard, hey, this is the year I'm going to get fit. Anybody going to do that this year? This is the year it's going to happen for me. Or maybe you just said, hey, no, I'm not going to get fit. My goal is to eat as many buffets. I'm just playing. I don't know what your goal is. Maybe it's, hey, this is the year I'm going to get my finances in order. This is the year I'm going to meet that special somebody, right? I don't know. This is the year that, I don't know what it might be for you. Maybe it's you're going to read the Bible. Maybe you got some big things. Or maybe it's, hey, this is the year I'm going to become more generous. Or I'm going to start to serve other people. Or I'm going to finally make time for the people in my life, to make sure. Maybe you've been to a funeral, maybe you've had a life experience, and you're going, you know what, I need to get around to what's important, and I'm learning that, hey, I'm spending all my time at work, or I'm so busy making a living that I don't have a life, and maybe you're going, hey, I'm going to make time for something this year. I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's, hey, maybe yours is what you're doing right now. You just started coming back to church, and you're going, maybe that's your thing, that this is what I'm going to accomplish this year, or not just this year, but your life goal. What are they? I know one person said, my goal is to do what I've set out to do in 2017. Okay, thought that was funny. That I meant to do in 2016, that I really should have done in 2015, okay? And so it just kind of, hey, it just keeps conglomerating because we never get around to it. And that brings us to what we're going to talk about today, which is, in order to accomplish anything, you know what you have to do? You have to start. Now, this is going to seem really simple. And what I'm about to say is the biggest dust statement in the world, yet I find most of us, if not all of us, get stuck here. That you will never, you can write this down if you want to, you will never accomplish anything that you haven't started. Did you know that? That you will never finish a journey that you don't start. You will never climb Mount Everest without taking the first step. I can guarantee it. You will never hit the ball. I never coached Little League, but one of my advices to Little League kids was this: just swing the bat. You know, the coach is going, you need to make sure you're looking for the right ball and all that. If you're in the ball, then you probably hate my advice. But you know what I found out? If you never swing the bat, you'll always strike out. Well, unless you just have a horrible pitcher, and sometimes that's the case with Little League. But for the most part, let me tell you something. Even if not, you'll never hit the ball if you never swing. Does that make sense? And we can come up with every excuse why we don't swing. And the older we get, the less likely we become very risk-averse, and we stop starting. So we're thinking it's for somebody young, but it's not. And the answer is this: you'll never accomplish anything you haven't started. So if you haven't started, you're never going to do it. So today we're going to take a look at one of my favorite characters in the Bible. I love him. He's a great leader in the Bible. And we're going to kind of take a look at the end of his life first, and then we're going to kind of go back and look at how this applies, and especially with a conversation that he had with God. Okay, so if you want to turn with me to the book of Hebrews, if you don't know where it is, if you're looking in your Bible, it's in the very back of the Bible, and then turn back, okay? You turn back a couple books, and that's the book of Hebrews. If you have your smartphones, you don't have to remember anything, because I learned that. You don't even have to learn Bible verses anymore or any of that. You just look it up on your phone, and it pops it up for you, which is kind of awesome. It's just like phone numbers. You know, who knows anybody's phone numbers anymore, right? If you lose your phone, if I lose my phone, I just can't function. Oh, you know the phone numbers. That's awesome. You must live in Zuni. I'm just playing. Okay. Still got it. I'm joking. Sorry. It's one of those days. I'm sorry. I'm just in that kind of weird mood. So we're going to begin with the end this morning. We can edit that out later. We're going to begin with the end this morning, okay, of this man's life. Hebrews chapter 11 is the Faith Hall of Fame, and it says this, that God says about this man. He says, by faith, Moses. If you could circle the word by faith, this is a big part to the whole picture of this man's life. We're going to talk about Moses today. When he had grown up, he refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Verse 25, he chose to be mistreated along with the other people, with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Verse 26, he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. Now, if you don't know who Moses is, I would like to briefly just kind of give you just kind of a snapshot of his life. So by the end of his life, he became known, and maybe you know who he is. Hopefully, if you don't, that's okay. Then we can catch you up. He's found in the book of Exodus in the Bible if you want to read about him. And who Moses was he was the greatest deliverer that the world had ever seen. He took the nation of Israel when they were slaves in Egypt, and his job was to take them from Egypt to the promised land. And that's exactly what he did with 2 million people, the greatest exodus in the history of mankind. Absolutely awesome. And it affects our lives to this day because it had a lot to do with Christ and a lot to do with what was going to happen next. But it fulfilled a lot of God's promises. But he was the leader that God chose. Now, it's very easy to look at the end of his life and go, wow, that's really great. He is this huge guy, and he really was. But let me give you a little bit about the background of his life. Some of you guys have heard the story before, but what I want you to do is I want you to think about it through the lens of starting today, okay? And I want you to think about it through the lens of your life. So don't just go, yeah, I've heard the story, and just back off it. Yeah, I've heard this message before. No, you haven't. And here's the thing. Some of you are stuck right here, so please, please, please pay attention because the life of Moses might affect you today. And even though you know it, don't get so familiar with it that it doesn't have a profound impact for you, okay? So just to give you a little bit, just in case you don't know about him, he was born at a time in the nation of Israel when they were slaves. He was born into slavery. And during that time, what had happened is for 400 years, they had been slaves in Egypt. Before that, Joseph had come down, one of Abraham's grandchildren, and he had went down, and he had said, hey, here's what I'm going to do, or great-grandchild of Abraham. And what he had done was he said, hey, I'm going to help them get out of famine because they had famine in the land. They all went down and lived in Egypt, and that was a good thing. And so they all liked them down in Egypt. They liked the Israelites at first. But then over time, the ethnic thing came to take place that goes, anytime you got civilizations that go, hey, wait a minute, you look a little bit different than we do, maybe you're a little bit less than we are, we want you to do all the work, so they made them the slaves. And they didn't like shepherds anyway, and so they just made them the slaves. And so they thought by abusing them more, they would actually do, but sometimes abuse makes people stronger. I don't know if you knew that. I mean, it can do two things. It can break a person, or it can actually make you stronger. And so the abuse that the Israelites faced made them strong. The more you beat me, the stronger they got, and they became kind of scary to the Egyptians. They were kind of like, we got a lot of strong men. And not only that, but they seem to, their children, they're having more and more children. God is blessing them, and we're a little bit afraid that they're going to be able to overpower us. And now, not only that, but we've been beating them, so now they're all strong and stuff. And so we're kind of scared that they're going to take over our country if we're not careful. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kill off, we're going to genocide some of them. This happens in the world even today. We live in the first world, so sometimes it's hard for us to imagine that there's genocide in the world today, but if you look at the country of Africa, there's huge genocides going on all over the world. And they wipe them out, and what they do is they took the babies and threw them into the Nile River. It's a horrible, horrible story, horrific story. And this is when Moses was born. The children of Israel are crying out for a deliverer, and Moses' mom had faith in God. That's why by faith is the most important part of this thing. And Moses' mother had faith in God, and so what she did was she formed a basket, and she put it in the Nile River and put him in it and had his sister kind of watch him and say, I don't know how this is going to work, but here's the thing. We just believe that God's going to provide. And Pharaoh's daughter found Moses in the Nile River. She was out there bathing or whatever they do, take baths, and so she found Moses. And she said, I want him to be my own son, Pharaoh's own daughter. And so she was going to bring him into Pharaoh's household, but she said, hey, I need somebody to breastfeed him. Maybe there is one of those people in Israel that's able to do that. And so she let Moses' mom raise him till about the time he was preschool or kindergarten age. That was kind of how long she had with him. And so she didn't know that was his mother, but she actually got to invest. And the part that I want you to see about that is this, is that she poured into him, hey, this is who we are. You are not an Egyptian. You are an Israelite. You have the promise of God. Don't ever forget who you are. I guarantee you that's what she poured into him. And that's just a side note, but for somebody it might be the main note, is to say, when you invest in a child, you have no idea how important it is, especially in those formative years. So as you bring your child to church and you get to know them, please, Rick Pennington asked me the other day, he said, don't just ask your kid, hey, how was it at church today? Ask them what they learned. Tell them why it's important. I'm just giving you a heads up because we don't really think, when we think about them being so little, and now after 7 years of the church and we go, man, the little ones are now big ones, you know what I mean? We don't think about that. But here's the thing, they will grow up. That will form them in a way that you have no idea. It doesn't mean you can't repair it later, but wherever you're at, start. But here's the thing, if you're a parent and you got a small child, you have no idea the investment that you're making that's so huge. This man became the greatest leader, and I think the part that he never forgot was what his mother told him. In fact, he didn't. By the time he was 40 years old, he had been trained, he had been given the best. He got to go to Pharaoh's household at about age 5, and he never forgot who he was, but he got trained by the best in the world. It's known through history that he got the best tutorers that were known in all of the world at their time. Through history, we learn that he was also a general in Pharaoh's army. That's just, I don't know if that's true or not, but he had extreme leadership abilities. He never forgot he was a Hebrew. And he would see his people being abused, and sometimes even harshly, and it would make him mad. And one day it made him mad to the point where a guard was beating somebody. He thought it was so bad, and the injustice, the social injustice that he saw, he killed the guard. His temper got away from him, and he struck the guard, and he killed him by accident. And I think he thought in the back of his mind, this is just my personal opinion, that he thought, I'm the deliverer. They'll rise up with me. I have so much leadership that I'm the right man. I think that my mom instilled in me, maybe you're the deliverer, Moses. And he rose up, and guess what? Nobody rose up with him. You ever had that happen? Where you thought you were so great, nobody else did? That's when you realize positional authority and relational authority. And then he found out very quickly, hey, because I'm supporting my people, they're not Pharaoh's people. And Pharaoh was like, you're not one of us anymore, Moses. And he put out a death order on Moses' life, and Moses fled, and he ran away. He was a fugitive. And he ran across a huge desert, which, by the way, Egypt's surrounded by desert. And so he just ran as far as he could go away from the lush area of Egypt. Egypt was one of the biggest food producers in the world. That's one of the things that made him awesome. But he ran away from all that, way away from it, so far that they wouldn't chase him around the desert. He goes down to this small town, if you want to call it that, in the middle of nowhere. If you've been to the place that he went, you wouldn't even know you've been there. If you had been there and knew it, you would want to forget it, okay? To this small little town called, I don't even have to finish it, Zunai, okay? If you're new, you won't know what we're talking about, but we have a thing with Zunai, but anyway. If you live in Zunai, I'm very sorry. I'm not sorry I made a joke, I'm just sorry that you have to, I'm just sorry. All right, we're done with the Zunai stuff for today. I love Zunai. I really do. And but it's not Zunai, it's Midian, okay? And he comes to this small town called Midian. Nothing wrong with small towns. I love small towns. I grew up in a small town. Nothing wrong with it. But here's where it's bad. You had a dream, and you get to Midian, and guess what happens? He finds somebody, and he gets married, and it's okay, but you had a dream of being a warrior. You had a dream of being the deliverer. You had a dream of carrying a sword in your hand, and instead, every morning you get up and you grab this shepherd's staff and you go out morning after morning after morning for 40 years. Some of you guys feel that. Maybe it hadn't been 40 years, but it feels like that. Anybody feel like your job, you're mundane, day after day after day after day until all of your dreams die? And I think that's where he was at. Okay, I'm not the deliverer. That's what happened. By age 80, he got up that morning not thinking about the Israelites anymore. I know that's who I am, but God's going to raise up a deliverer, but it ain't me. That's who he was. And so he gets up, and he walks out that morning as he'd done 40 years worth, and he goes out to watch his sheep and to get old. And as he's there, he sees a bush that doesn't burn up. Maybe you've heard of it, the burning bush. And so it's this bush that doesn't burn up, but it has nothing to do with the bush. But he's like, hey, it didn't burn up, so that's kind of cool. And so he goes over to it to see what's happening. And out of the bush, God says, basically, okay, I won't get into all the details, but basically he just says, you're the deliverer. And Moses does one of these. He looks over his shoulder like, Me? Now let me get this straight. I mean, 40 years ago, I was in my prime when I was in my 40s, like me. Okay. But at 80 years old, right, Ben? You wanted that. I mean, you've asked me to do that before. I know. But at 80 years old, no, right? I'm a little tired. I'm a little bit, but it's more than tired. You see, it had nothing to do with age because, by the way, Ben's one of the greatest leaders that I know. And he sits there Sunday after Sunday and does amazing things. And Moses was an amazing man, but he had a dream that died inside of him, and you don't know what that feels like. Maybe you do, right? And so he's thinking, not me. If it was me, you should have done it before, but you didn't. And now it's not right. I can't. You see, there's a piece inside of him that died, but that's exactly what God was looking for. He was looking for somebody that could be humble. Very important to God. You see, what we look at is we look at how great these leaders are and how awesome they are and how much they can carry themselves with so much pride and so much arrogance, and God goes, I don't want any of that, so it takes 40 years to get you right. Now God's ready. And you know what you got to do? You got to start. And Moses is like, no. So what I want to do is I want to give you a couple of things as you look at your dream of what God, I believe, is saying to all of us, that this is the end, and we look at the end of Moses' life, and we're probably intimidated by the end of his life because after 4,000 years, we're still talking about Moses, right? Will they talk about us? Probably not. But here's the point. It's not about that. It's about how it started for Moses, because I think it's the same for you, that every dream has to start. You know where you start? Number one, you start where you are. You start where you are. You know what? You can't start anywhere else, by the way. You can only be where you are. But that's where you start. Because some of us, the excuse is, I can't do it because, well, I'm not in the right place yet. But you will never, can I say it again? Maybe you need to write this down. You need to understand this. You will never become anything you haven't started. You will never finish what you haven't started. You will never accomplish anything you don't start. And you know where you start? Where you are. Okay. Let me tell you what Moses had to say about that. It might be the same thing you're saying. Exodus, if you want to flip back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis and then the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 3 and verse 11, it says this, but Moses said to God, this is at the burning bush, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Who am I? Basically, he's saying, I'm not the right one, right? I can't do it because you know where I'm at. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I've been here for a very long time, and I have arthritis, and sometimes I use this. Sometimes I use my staff for the sheep, and sometimes I use it just to carry myself, you know. You can't mean me. You can't possibly mean me. And God says this, verse 12. And God said, I will be with you. Can you underline that? I will be with you. And this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you when you have brought the people out of Egypt, and you will worship God on this mountain. Where you're standing at right now, this will be a sign to you that only God can do what's about to occur. You know why I waited 40 years? So you would know that it took God to do what's going to happen here today. So you wouldn't have thought it was some 40-year-old brash, arrogant leader of Israel that thought that he was so awesome that I need the 80-year-old that said, who, me? And that would keep saying, who, me? But the reason why you can do this, so important to this whole story, the reason why you can do it is because I will be with you. You understand that? This is the reason why you can. Not because you're so great, Moses, because you know you're not, right? After 40 years, you kind of know. Not because you're so great, but because I will be with you. The phrase I want you to write down is this. It doesn't matter where you are. It matters who you're with. It doesn't matter where you are when you know who you're with. Can I say it again? Maybe you need to write this down. It doesn't matter where you are when you know who you're with. It doesn't matter what your circumstances when you know who you're with. I had a chance to think about that this week because it snowed. Did everybody enjoy the snow? It's coming back. If you didn't, you'll get another chance at it if you don't like it. Virginia, just wait a minute and then the weather will change. So as I looked at the snow, it brought back a lot of childhood memories. We're in the process of moving, not to Zuni, but to Windsor, which is awesome for us. I wanted to move to Zuni just so everybody could say, oh, man. But we're buying a house. And so you get kind of nostalgic and you start to look back at things and a lot of floods of memories and different things come back. And so I thought back to when I was a kid and it snowed. And I used to love it when I was a little kid, like preschool age, maybe kindergarten age, and way back then. And so looking back on it, I was like, man, I used to love doing that and getting out with the kids in the neighborhood and playing. But in our neighborhood, we grew up in Portsmouth on Greenland Boulevard. And across from us was a big hill where all the neighborhood kids would come out and we would slide down it. And back then, they would use we didn't have sleds. Like, I don't know who does that now, but they would find old pieces of sheet metal. No wonder we survived, right? I mean, like the kids nowadays, they would just die just looking at it if they touched it, right? I mean, but we ate lead-based paints and stuff, and it was like, hey, if you survive, whatever don't kill you makes you stronger. That's where we were. And that's the generation I lived in, metal sliding boards and as tall as you could get. And, hey, you just learn, right? And you fall off it a couple times, you'll learn. And anyway, but here's the situation. In our neighborhood, I was kind of the youngest, so I'm 10 years younger than my brother. So when I was in preschool, kindergarten age, 4 or 5, my brother would have been 14 or 15. And so when I went out to play, what happened was when I went out to do the snow, everybody would get on the same thing because it would make it go faster. And because my brother was there, I got to ride in the front. He'd put me in the front. Okay, my little brother, I'll put you in the front. So then, that was kind of cool. Well, then when he left, the neighborhood kids were older, and they were kind of like, you need to go home, little boy. And even back then, hopefully I've honed this skill a little bit now, but I was a little bit manipulative. And so they said, you need to go home, little boy. And I thought to myself, I was like, huh. So I said, hey, if you don't let me ride on this, my brother will beat you up. I don't even know if you know that. I don't even know if my brother knows that I told him that. And you know what? They let me ride. I got to ride the whole day, and I was so happy, and I think they were happy too. But anyway, the point was they did that because they were afraid. Why? Because of me? No. Because of where I was? No. Because of who I was with. Does that make sense? Now, don't do that. But think of it this way. Whatever you're facing in your life, it doesn't matter where you are. It matters who you're with. Your God is bigger than anything you face. You understand? So when it comes to starting, you're going to find every excuse in the world why you can't start. But here's the thing. You need to start. You see, some of us, I wrote down a couple things just to make sure I didn't forget. Some of us, it's our past mistakes. God can't use me. Oh, no, I can't do that because I have a past and God can never use me. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't need to change, but here's the thing. God is with you. Oh, that's nice for Moses. That was a nice line for Moses. No, that's a theme throughout the whole Bible. God is with you. You read in the Garden of Eden, when he created mankind, God was with them. He says to Moses, he says to every great leader, I will be with you. In one place, he tells one leader, I will be with you wherever you go. And you go, well, that's nice for the Old Testament. That's nice for these special leaders. I'm not that person. In John 3:16, it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Don't you think that it doesn't mean you? John 3:17, you know what it says? God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. It means that God doesn't condemn you, he's for you. And in another place in Romans, it says, if God be for you, then who can be against you? Does that make sense? God with us. You know what it says in the book of Matthew? It says that Jesus came, and the best name of Jesus, it says he will be called Emmanuel, which means God with us. You're a bigger part of this story than you think. Don't you dare let your past mistakes. You see, some of us, we're not starting what God has called us to do. We're making every excuse in the world because we're going, well, I'm not in the right place. Well, I messed up and I can't do it. And God is with you. It isn't how big you are. It isn't what other people say you are. It's who God says you are. And God says, I am with you. It doesn't matter where you are. It matters who you're with. That works with finances. That works with anything you can think of. Okay, number one, start where you are. Number two, use what you have. Number two, use what you have. Number one, start where you are. Number two, use what you have. Exodus chapter 4 and verse 1, Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you. You know what he's doing? He's making every excuse not to start. Can I tell you something? You'll never finish anything you don't start. God understands that. If you didn't start this journey, Moses, if you don't take the first step, you're never going to deliver the children of Israel. Now, there's many steps along the way, and there are more steps than you'll ever know. This is not about understanding. This is about starting what God says, okay? Not only that, but here's the thing. You're not only not starting, you're making excuses for not doing what God said. God said to do this, and you're talking yourself out saying, well, I know God said, but if that's what you ever say, you're wrong. Because now you think you are God. If God said to do this, now that's why it's so important to go back to last week's message and go, do you know what your why is? If you don't, you better start with why. You better start with Jesus. Does that make sense? Because if you hadn't heard from Jesus and you're out there doing it by yourself, you better be scared because you're going to go to Pharaoh. He's going to kill you. I have a dream, and it's my dream. Remember, we started the first message, and we talked about death of a dream. Do you know why it's so important? So that we can have the message today that says, start doing what God said. But if it's not what God said, you better go back, and maybe your start is figure out what God said. Maybe you've never had the burning bush moment. But some of you, that's not true. You have. You let it die because you've never started. And what you're doing is you're waiting for everything to be in line. But here's what God has to say. Verse 2, here's how he answers Moses. Then the Lord said to him, what is in your hand? What is in your hand? And Moses says this, a staff. Now, I've been thinking about that staff. For us, it probably means nothing, right? Or it means something huge for most Christians because we go, we know what that means. We know what that staff is. Oh, it's awesome. But to Moses, it represented something else. It represented 40 years of a dead dream. You see, what is in my hand? Are you kidding me? You called me to be the deliverer. You know what needs to be in a deliverer's hand? You know, like what was in Samson's hand, a sword, a saber, a ruling thing, you know what I mean, a crown. You know, that's what a ruler has. That's what somebody that delivers has, not a shepherd's staff. You know what this represents? This represents running from Egypt. This represents shepherding sheep that I can't stand looking at every day in this podunk town, which is fine, and I love the people here, but here's the problem. This is not what God, no. A shepherd's staff? What do you got in your hand, Moses? A staff? And I think he said it like that. This. You know what I can tell you about God? God uses what you have. What you have, this is what I want you to write down. What you have is exactly what God uses. What you have is exactly God uses. By the way, he rarely uses other things. Did you know that? And I'll tell you something, there's a story in the book of 1 Kings about Elijah. And what Elijah does is he's one of the prophets of God, and God tells Elijah, go to this widow lady who's got a son, and and he doesn't realize this part, but he said, go ask her for a meal. And he comes to her and he says, will you provide a meal for me? And she says, well, I don't know if that's going to be possible, because this is the last meal we have before we die. There's a famine. This is the last meal, and then we're going to die. And Elijah doesn't back off of it like most of us would be like, I'm so sorry I asked. But he's like, well, God said it, so here's the thing. Just make me a little bit, and you a little bit, and your son a little bit, and let's see what God does. And you know what God does? Every day for 3 years, he filled, and they had enough for cakes every day. They had just enough. They didn't get more. They didn't get you see, what some of us are waiting on is God to give you everything before you start. You show me the plan, you show me the money, you show me all the stuff, and then I'll start. And that's not how God works. God says, what do you have? That's exactly what I need. I can use what you have. Remember, it isn't about where you are. It isn't about what you have. It's about God. It's about who you're with. It's that he's with you. And he will use exactly what you have. For you, for me, for Moses, the staff represents something horrible. It represents a life of dead dreams. To God, it represents humility. Do you know why he picked the staff? Because he said, every time you look at it, Moses, here's what I want you to remember. I did this. Oh, I know. For 40 years, you thought God couldn't do it. But today, you're going to find out God can use that staff that represented everything about your life that you hated, but that's going to be the symbol of God. And maybe you didn't realize that, but it is. You see, it's going to represent deliverance. It's going to represent victory. And you know where the staff resides today? You might not know. It resides in the Ark of the Covenant of God. They built an ark that represents the Shekinah glory of God, and they placed the staff of Aaron and of Moses in that ark. That staff. You know why? Because he goes, I did it with what you had. Don't you tell me you don't have what you need. Some of us are waiting until God will give us something, right? God, give me this and then I'll go. That's not how it works, by the way. It isn't wait and then I'll go. It's you start doing and then God will provide along the way. But the first thing he's going to ask is this. Hey, before we get started on this journey, hey, what do you got? That's what we're going to use. But you can't use me, right? You know, what do you got in your hand? I've got a hammer, right? I got a guitar. Not me, somebody, right? I've got a mouth, okay? Some people shouldn't use hammers, like me. Like I found that out yesterday. We just bought a new house, and now I'm doing all these projects and stuff. My wife is very crafty and projecty, and I am the opposite of that. I only have one thing. I'm only good at one thing. I can run my mouth, okay? I might not be good at it, but I can do it, okay? And so what do you got? What do you have? Some people can't speak out in public. Some people, you know, they can play guitar. Some people, they got a hammer and they shouldn't sing, right? I mean, you get the idea, right? Don't do what you don't have. You're going to be horrible at it. And some people are trying to do things that's not their thing. Some people, it's technology. You might affect the world through technology. God can use what you have. You go, I don't have anything. See, as soon as you say that, that's not God speaking, that's you speaking. Because if you ask Moses, you know what the lady said when Elijah came? I don't have anything. No, wait a minute. You got one more meal. Well, I only got one more meal. You see, that's scarcity mentality. Oh, I got to hold on to what I have. And God's going, give me that and I'll make you the deliverer of the world. Give me that and I'll help you. But you start with what you have. Let me ask you a question today. What do you have? You start where you are, but you know what? God uses what you have. And what you have is exactly what God will use. Somebody, the light bulb's going off in your head today. I thought God couldn't use me. Oh, I don't really have anything. Oh, no, you get the picture, right? That's Moses. Okay, number 3. Do what you can. Do what you can. Number 1, start where you are. Number 2, use what you have. And number 3, do what you can. Exodus chapter 4, verse 10, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. This guy's really not planning on going. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since I have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Now, I've heard theologians, and I don't know where they come up with this, but they say Moses was not good at speaking. Maybe he wasn't. Some people believe he had a speech impediment. I don't know if that's true. I've never heard that. You know what I heard? I heard somebody that grew up in Pharaoh's household. I heard somebody that was a general in Pharaoh's army. That's what I hear from history. I hear somebody that exuded leadership to the place that when a guard attacked somebody, he was ready to strike them. That did not sound like somebody didn't have confidence. This sounds like a jitter that you picked up along the way. This sounds like somebody that has lost, they become insecure because of things that have happened to them. I've never been eloquent of speech. I don't believe that. You speak more than one language. You had the best educators in the whole world. Don't tell me you can't speak. But you're scared, right? I can't, right? You ever had that happen? You came and then it happened and you either got beat up and then you ran and then you shrank and now I can't do anymore. That's where he's at. And I have a feeling there's other people here. And he's making excuses. You know what he's making excuses for? Not to start. God's dream is before you. God is calling you to go, Moses. And by the way, you're never going to finish anything you don't start. You're never going to deliver the people if you don't start. You're never going to accomplish what God's asked you to do if you don't start. Okay, you get the idea. Do what he said. Do what you can. Verse 11, the Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouth? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight and makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Verse 12. Now go. He says this twice, doesn't he? Now go, and I will help you speak and teach you what to say. You know what the words that I want you to see is? Now go. You want to circle that? Now go. What's God calling you to do? Now go. Whatever God's calling you to do, whatever that was on your list, what is the next right step? What is the next step? By the way, if you don't do that step, just mark it off your list because you're never going to do it. I learned that from Getting Things Done. It was a great book. But the one thing I took from the book is a very detailed guide. I was like, I'm not doing all these lists. I can't do all these things. But I remember the one thing he said, take out your list of things you'd love to accomplish in your life and write an action step. If you don't have an action step for it, mark it off your list. You're never going to do it. Can I tell you something? Whatever God's calling you to do, if you're not willing to do the next step now, mark it off your list. You're never going to do it. Stop putting it off. Today is the day, right? Jesus says it all the time. Today is the day of salvation. Now, does that mean, here's what I want to make sure you understand. The first step, not the last step. Now, I know this is a church planner. I know this is a person that's got big dreams. What I want to do is, I'd like to summit Everest, and what I'm looking at is, I go, oh, how many steps is that going to take? One? No. If you decide to climb Mount Everest, you're not climbing it today. Does that make sense? And here's where the discouraging part comes. A lot of people go, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to accomplish all my dreams, and I'm going to take that big step today. No, you're going to take a little step today. And Moses had no idea how little this step was going to be. You see, because to get to Egypt, you could walk there in probably a couple weeks. And you could get 2 million people to the promised land in probably a year. You know how long it took them to get them there? 40 years. Not 4, 40. One step in a long journey. But let me explain something to you today. If you never started the first step, it never is going to happen. So don't look at the big picture. All you got to ask yourself is this: are you going to start what God told you to do? Are you willing to go where God called you to go? Here's the phrase that I want you to get today. You be you and let God be God. You be you and let God be God. Don't start into this, well, no more excuses. That's my point. No more excuses as to why you can't start what God's saying. You see, God, and here's what you need to understand. God provides as you go. This is the biggest thing I get asked as a pastor. I want to do this great thing, and I'm so discouraged because it hasn't happened for me. God provides as you go. You want to say it with me? God provides as you go. Look at your kid and say this right now. I'm just playing. Right? If you don't, he doesn't. Well, God hasn't provided for me like everybody else. You want to know why? Because you haven't started. You haven't started to walk where he's going. But it's hard. Oh, yeah, did I mention this journey for Moses was the most difficult journey? In fact, it ended his life. He ended before it finished. This is God's plan, not yours. And it's not about how you see it. It's not about your role in it. It's about what God will do because he is with you. And he will accomplish it. But he'll only accomplish it in you if you start. If you don't start, he'll use someone else because you won't go. If Moses wouldn't go, somebody's going to go to deliver these people. And he's going, I selected you, Moses. Now, did God know in his sovereignty? Of course he did. Does God know what you're going to do? Of course he does. But here's my thing. Don't think it's just going to happen. There's a lot of work to be done, but here's how it works. Here's the effort on our part. Start. Do you know, and a launch is the hardest thing on the entire world to do. Did you know that? That a launch, it takes more effort to get it up off the ground than anything else. I know that as a church plant. You'll spend more money getting it up off the ground, and then it takes over, right? It's the launch. The hardest thing in the world is to get you moving, to take the first step. Now, you got to know where you're going. But once you do, and you know, hey, God's called me to go here, but I don't know all the details, you take the next step, and God will provide. I want to share a story just because it fits for me, and I've been looking back at it, and I saw it on my wall because I've been moving all my stuff. And for me, it was God called me to plant a church, and I knew it. And I felt it a number of years ago, and we recently had to go back through that process with Acts 2 and some other leaders, like, hey, what was your journey? Why did you get there? Why did you do this? And I went, hey, when it started was, 20-some years ago, And I started meeting with Jim Wall, and it was a dream that God, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And there started to become things. And then when our life fell apart, it seemed like, hey, that's never going to happen. And when you can't do what God's wanting you to do, you get very discouraged. I don't know if anybody's ever had that, but, it was even difficult going to church at the time when my wife started having post-traumatic stress from different things. and she would have panic attacks, and she couldn't go to church with me. And my son was in preschool. Now he's 19. But he was in preschool at the time, and I thought, I really need to keep him in church. I mean, I had that much sense, you know. That one day, maybe I'll figure this thing out, and then when I go back to church, I don't want him to be against church, so maybe I'll take him. And it was the hardest thing in the world for me. And I would go with my mom because my wife couldn't go, and I would go there, and all I would do is criticize every single thing in the service. Now, some of you guys have heard this before, but what I want to point out is this. If you're being critical, there ain't something wrong with somebody else. It's you. Ooh. Nobody wants to hear that, right? Ooh, I'm stepping on some toes. But here's the reason why I'm doing it, because your dreams aren't happening, and it's the same thing that happened to me. I went there, I can't do it. And I would come back from the service, and we'd sit at lunch, and all I would do is criticize everything they were doing. And you know what my mom did one day? She just said, you know, John, you have a lot of good ideas. I didn't, but that's what she said to me. I couldn't believe it. And she said, after I just slammed everything that church did, she said, you know, you got all these ideas. You know what you need to do? You need to go back to college. You got 2 more years to finish your degree. Go do it. You've talked about it. You know what I did as soon as she said it? Oh, I can't do that. But see, you don't understand why I said that. Let me explain why I said that. Let me explain my circumstances. My wife had just had all these problems. She couldn't work. We were 2-family income, and we had already stretched our income to the limit. We were way overboard on everything. We owed more money on our house than what it was worth. I mean, by a lot. They used to let you do that. They don't do that now, but man, they were crazy back then. And we borrowed all this money and more money and more money and more money, and then after we paid off our credit cards, we charged them all back up again. We were stupid. That was part of it. But there was also circumstances that led us down that path, and there was all kinds of excuses for why we got there, but that's where we were, okay? Where do we start? Where you are. I can't. That's not possible. I looked at the amount of debt I had and what I was making and what was going to happen to me, and I went, I'll never be out of debt the rest of my life. That's where I'm at. And I remember she said, here's what I'm going to do. You talked about this college that's so impossible for you to go to. I'll help you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have faith in God. Now, after all this stuff that I had taught, I had no faith. So she said, I'll give you the money for the application fee. And I was like, what a waste of time. What a waste of money. I don't have any money to go. And if I did, nothing's getting better. This is ridiculous. You can ask her. That's exactly what I said to her. And she said, well, I'm going to do it. So I went to a trusted advisor. Okay, because I had one. I started with a Crown financial counselor, and I told the Crown financial counselor, hey, I'm going to meet with you. This is before they had financial peace. And I said, I need to meet with you because I don't have any good choices left. So I know that. I used to be a collector, so, you know, nothing like a doctor that doesn't, you know, being operated on. And so I was like, I know what choices I have left. There's no good ones, so I need somebody to be a sounding board. And so I went to that guy because he's the only person left in my life, and I said, you know, you're not going to believe this. My mom thinks that I ought to apply for college right now. And he's like, I think it's a great idea. I'll pay for your first class. And I said, you guys are stupid. You know, I really did. I was like, what are you thinking? And every reason in the world came up for, no, I can't do that. That's crazy because I can't finish. I don't want to start something I can't finish. And they said, no, you need to have faith. You step out and see what God does. And let me tell you, I've never had anything like that happen to me since. But the day I applied for the class, we got a check in the mail for back pay for disability that helped us sell our house and get straight. We didn't have enough money to do everything, but it was enough that I could take 3 classes. And I didn't have to have my house foreclosed on, and I didn't have to file bankruptcy. I did not pay off all my bills. I had a whole bunch. That's a whole different story for another day. But here's what I want to tell you. I took a step. And you know how long it took because Marie was in and out of the hospital, and every day that I went to college, I kept thinking, this is dumb. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know. I don't see this happening. I'm not involved the way I went. And the day I graduated, by the way, it took me, I had 2 years left, and I crammed them into 4. This is like a remedial church if you didn't know. So you got a remedial pastor, but that's okay. You're okay. It's a good place for you. And and what happened? The day I graduated college, you know what happened the day I graduated college? The day I held my diploma in my hand. That's not the finish line, by the way. The day I held my diploma in my hand, I had a conversation with Jim Wall that went like this. Hey, you still thinking about planting a church? I just started the community group in Isle of Wight. Would you like to be part of it? Isn't that amazing? Now, that's a whole different journey, right? It took 3 more years, right? So it takes time. The journey was a lot longer. Believe me, Moses' journey was a lot longer than he ever expected. It didn't go like he thought. It isn't about where you are, it's who you're with. It isn't about how long, it's who you're with. And it's that you start. But if you don't start, God will never meet those needs. You see, if you're waiting on, well, let me just have all the money and then I'll go. No, you go and then it will start. Now, you got to answer the question why first, right? Don't be doing dumb things and going, hey, I'm not doing what God's calling me to do and I'm outside of God's will. Go back and listen to message 1 and 2. But if you know, you've got to start. You've got to start. Because if you don't start, you won't be able to do it. So here's my thing for you today. No more excuses. I wrote down a few things so I wouldn't forget. Take the next step. Not the last step, the next step. There may be 100,000 steps between here and the end of your journey. But you got to take the first one or you're never going to get there. You know what? It's because God is with you. Maybe it's your marriage today. I don't know what it is for you, so don't. If you're not on this list, that's okay. But here's the thing. Maybe it's your marriage for you. You know what you need to do? Maybe you're going, hey, my marriage has been rough for so long, and we're about to call it quits. Some of you guys, you've already gotten counsel, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying to you today. Maybe you've done everything you can, and you are there. But some of you, you're going, hey, my marriage is falling apart. You haven't done anything. You haven't taken the next step, but you just go, no, this is just done. You know what you need to do? Maybe it's the time for you to set the appointment for counseling. Oh, well, that don't work for me. I know. Hey, God can't fix this. Really? But he's not going to fix it if you don't start. You're never going to hit the ball if you don't swing. Does that make sense? Well, it only works for a whole bunch of other people, but it won't work for me, right? Because you can't see it. But I'm telling you what you don't want to hear, which is, well, he's not going to fix it. Well, let me say it. It's the first step, not the last step. He's not going to fix your marriage. Oh, did you think he's going to fix your marriage today? Do you think the children of Israel are going to be delivered today? You're going to summit Everest today? No. You got to start making a plan today. He's not fixing your marriage today. You got to take a step today. Maybe as you get counseling, then your spouse will eventually go with you. You get the picture? I understand. Maybe it's your marriage is ending. That's okay. I mean, like, if you're there and that's where you are, I understand. We're not here to pick on you because you've had the bad thing. But here's the thing. I think anybody would say, hey, if you're really trying to make it work, take the next step. If you don't take the next step, it isn't going to work. Okay, here's another one. Finances. This is the year I'm going to get my finances in order. But you think it's just going to take care of itself. Maybe you need to sign up for financial peace. We've done it here. It's a class with Dave Ramsey. And if you need to know about it, you let us know. We might offer it here again, but don't wait. Maybe this year you're going, hey, I need to get it straight. And what you need to do is you need to go sign up for the online class and take it now. Don't wait. Do it now. What are you waiting on? Next year to be worse? Right? Take the next step. You're going to find another church. Other churches are offering it. All you got to do is sign up, and they'll tell you every church in the area that's offering it. Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey. If you Google it, you will find it. Well, I want you to do it for me. No, that's the problem. Start where you are. You need to start. And by the way, this fixing people stuff doesn't work. I'm telling you. If we do it for you, it's not going to work. But here's what we're willing to do. If you go and you go, I just don't have enough to make it, we might be able to help you. But you got to take the step. The resources will come as you take the steps. Don't be a victim. This is the day, no more victim. You see, Moses held a staff to be a victim. I can't. No, that's Satan talking. That's not God. God didn't make victims. He will deliver you. But he delivers you through a process, and he's saying, start. Okay, get it? Okay. Marathon. You want to run a marathon this year. You know what you got to do? Download the app From the Couch to a 5K. Okay, don't start running a marathon. You run a marathon today, you're going to have a heart attack and die, right? After the first 100 yards or something, you know? But for some of us, we understand, hey, if we're going to start running, what do we do, right? I don't know why a marathon would be a goal, but okay, whatever. But if it is, start with a 5K. Then start more and more and more and more, and it'll happen. It starts with the first step. But if you don't get off the couch, never going to happen. Never going to happen. Addiction. I know this is a little sensitive. You know why I'm being sensitive today and I'm okay with that? Because some of you guys have been stuck. And I am not here to guilt trip you or punch you in the gut, and sometimes maybe I come across that way. I don't know why, but anyway, maybe I do. That's not what I'm intending. But here's what I know. There's people that are stuck in addiction. And what I hear more than anything is this. All the reasons why they can't do the next step. Maybe you need to sign up for AA. Maybe you need to go to an AA meeting. Maybe you need to go to an NA meeting. Maybe you go celebrate recovery. I'm not trying to pick the meeting that you need, but why not? How could it hurt, right? But too many people are going to meetings because we drag them to meetings, and we know what we've learned as a church. I don't drag nobody to meetings anymore because it don't work. Then it's, well, John, it didn't work for me because it's your fault, and you're supposed to be the Messiah. I'm not Messiah. I got enough problems of my own. I can't fix me. I definitely can't fix you, but God can. And you know where he starts? Where you are. Well, I'm not sober today. I understand, but you can go to a meeting today, and you can start in the process of surrender. Isn't that, after all, what Christianity is? That our sins aren't just washed away and we're all done and we never sin again. Anybody? If you are, I'll step down and you can get up here and be Messiah. How about that? But it's you start where you are. Now, you can change some of it, but you can't change all of it. And some of you guys are white-knuckling it, and you're trying, and every other time it's, I've been sober for a week, or I've been sober for a couple days, and this time it's going to work because I'm doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and it's never going to work. And it's time, for God's sake, please sign up, because I'm telling you, you're never going to be better because you're doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I'm not yelling at you. I love you. And I want you to finally be free. And I'm telling you, where freedom starts is when you take a step towards God. I would say take a step towards you, but he's already there. Okay? And he's calling you out today, and he's saying, take the next right step. And for some of us, maybe it's a meeting. I don't know. For some of us, it's giving. We said, hey, we're going to give, and we've never been generous, and you've never wrote that check. I want to be careful with that one, because I go, if you're a visitor here today, I know the number one reason why people don't go to church is you want our money. Can I tell you, as a visitor, we never invited you here to give us money, okay? We never will. We're not going to invite people. Money, yes, it helps the church. Yes, we're thankful for it. Yes, we appreciate the generous donations of people. We are not here to do a marketing, branding. We believe that church is a family, not just an organization. It has an organizational side. We promise we'll take care of it and do the best business that we possibly can. And the church will use the money for the glory of God. But here's the thing. That ain't what I'm talking about today, okay? And if you're here today and you go, I'm not ready to give and I don't know anything about that, we didn't invite you here to give, so please don't give until you understand. But if you're here and you go, hey, I've been coming for a long time, and I know that this is what I should be doing, but you've never stepped out in faith and gave to God, it's crushing your finances. You have no idea, because you're not giving what God's called you to do. And I'm just telling you, you got to start. Start small, but start. Don't write checks for money you don't have. Don't take a step by faith that God didn't tell you. But if God said, this is what you need to do, then do that, okay? And sometimes he changes things right in the middle of it. Some people, hey, they had things come up and they can't give certain things. I get that part. That's not who I'm talking to. What I'm talking to is the person that goes, I've been meaning to do this for the last year. Last year I was going to start, and I didn't. Last year I started and I quit, and now I'm just never going to do it again. And God's coming right back to this place, and he's saying, step out in faith. That's all I'm telling you, okay? Maybe it's church. Some of you, you've been coming here a very long time, but you've never really been part. And I'm going to tell you something. If you don't step out, you never will. And unfortunately, here's what people like us do, okay, because I'm one of you. Here's what I did, and here's what I know you're doing. You're going to vilify everyone else. You're going to start making villains and go, they just don't care about me. Nobody called me. I was there, and nobody called me. And the first thing I say is, are you in a small group? Oh, no, that don't work for me. I don't have time for that. Can I tell you something? If you're not in a small group, you're never going to have the help that you need. I'm just being honest. When the world falls apart and you don't have that inner circle, we will do everything we can to help you. But believe me when I tell you, if you don't have it, it won't be there. And if you don't invest in it, it won't be there. And you got to start. I understand it's hard. I understand it's scary. I understand maybe you've had hurts and pains and stuff. And God is saying, I'm with you, right? But step out in faith and be part. Otherwise, you're going to get there and you're going to go, nobody's there. And then you're going to be taught to be a victim, like me, because that's what I did. You know why I criticized the churches? Because I was a victim. You know what's happened to me? You know why I can't do this? You know what this is? And God's saying, I don't need any more excuses. You know what I need to do? I need you to take the next right step. The next right step is to connect for somebody. Maybe the next right step is just stay after church today for the pastor's breakfast and tell me how horrible I am. That's okay. That's what I would have done. Let me tell you. It's okay. But here's the thing. Take the next right step. Maybe it's serving. For some of you, serving is going to unlock something in you that nothing else will. I believe this. And some people are waiting to serve Some people are waiting to serve until they get their whole life straight. I understand. They're going, I'm not worthy to serve yet, just like Moses was saying. I'm not eloquent with my speech. I can't do these things. And I understand that different levels of service and different levels of leadership takes different levels of morality and stuff like that, and you don't have all that straight. But here's the thing. We got entry-level areas to serve for anybody that wants to, no matter what you got going on in your life. And here's the thing. When you serve, God will show up right beside you. When you take that step, some things are only learned through the servant centers, believe me. That's how he did with his disciples. Hey, wash feet. Hey, do these things. Do this. Not because we're trying to use you or abuse you or we just have need, but it unlocks what God wants to do. And here's the thing. If you'll take the step, God will help you get where you got to go. But here's the thing. He helps people that are moving, not people that are just sitting there. If you're just going to sit there, you're going to come back next year and you're going to go, you know what? One day I'm going to get around to it. You know when that day is? Right now. Don't wait. Because God has an amazing plan for you. I wrote down one more thing. Mother Teresa said this. If you can't feed 100 people, this is the excuse. Just feed one. You know, Mother Teresa helped billions of people, I think, after a period of time. The entire nation of India is thankful to her and other nations in the world. But here's what I know. She said it right. If you can't feed 100, just feed one. And to that one, you might make all the difference in the world. You know, some people he needs in Zuni. Did you know? Telling you the truth. Because here's how it'll end. Hebrews chapter 11, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as Pharaoh's daughter. And he chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. And he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. Moses is now known as the greatest leader the world's ever known. What do you want? You know what you got to do? Start. Can I pray for you? Let's stand for prayer.